Your Excellency Vijay Kanduja, welcome to GlobeWatch, and thank you very much for choosing GlobeWatch and the Cameroon Radio Television for your first SIT one-on-one interview in Cameroon.
Thank you very much, Charles. It's a pleasure to be on CRTV and the Global Watch. Thank you.
My first question to you will be at the United Nations, which just concluded the 2024 General Assembly debates, and amongst the countries that participated, of course, it's India under the Cameroonian presidency of the United Nations. What is the key takeaway of this year's UN General Assembly meetings, according to India?
Well, I think there is a lot of clamoring for expansion of the UN Security Council. I think more and more people have been voicing support for that, because the UN, which was formed after the World War, it doesn't reflect the current realities. At that time, there were 50 odd countries which were members, and now we are close to 200. So I think more and more people are asking for the reform of the UN Security Council. It's inconceivable from the point of view of India that there is no country from Africa which is a member. So we've always stood with Africa.
A permanent member of the United Nations
Permanent member, yes, Security Council. That's right. The form in which it would take place, I can't say anything more. It's the people who are, doing the UN work, which would be more clued up on what sort of reform would happen. But I think there is more and more impatience over the fact that some of the countries are not allowing the reforms to happen.
One of the key issues affecting the world today is climate change, which is eroding very fast the natural environment. And one of the key areas of the global climate change debate and global warming is pollution. And India is one of the hardest hit countries in the world when it comes to pollution, costing your economy roughly $100 billion yearly. How bad is the situation of pollution in India?
Well, we have recognized this fact and we have taken measures. If you see, in the past 10 years since the government led by Honorable Prime Minister Mr. Narendra Modi took power, we have initiated a series of reforms, including increasing the share of the renewable energy. 2-3 days ago, we have again set ambitious targets, having achieved the previous ones, to almost bring the share of renewables to 50% in the next coming few years. Our Prime Minister has been taking initiative in the form of afforestation also. Recently a campaign was launched, Ek Ped Maa Ke Naam, which means everybody should plant a tree in the name of Mother. We also refer to Earth as Mother Earth. So this is a way of saying that we should be more conscious about our climate and we should be taking care of it.
Well, one of the issues when it comes to the climate debate, of course, was as seen in the Paris Climate Change Deal of 2015, adopted by nearly all the members of the United Nations, was to ensure that there is some kind of financial justice to countries that are suffering from the causes or the fallouts of climate change, which they were not responsible on the onset. I can talk of Africa, especially the Congo Basin area or the Amazon or whatsoever. In terms of that commitment, has India done enough?
Well, number one, we have taken more obligations than we are required to take because we have not been the net polluters, yet we have taken responsibilities, and we have always stood by the principle of CBDR, common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. This is an important principle, and it's not a principle which India has, taken out of the blue, because this finds mention in the Kyoto Protocol, it finds mention in the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. So this takes into account that this is a common good, so everybody is responsible to put it back to the extent we can.
Excellence, Monsieur le Ministre, vous êtes la voix du Mali dans le monde entier actuellement en tant que ministre des Affaires étrangères. Parlons du Mali maintenant. L'une des valeurs de l'OCI, l'Organisation de la coopération islamique, c'est la promotion de la paix, et à un certain moment, personne n'ignore la situation du terrorisme en Afrique de l'Ouest et au Mali en particulier. Quelle est la situation aujourd'hui?
Bon, la situation au Mali sur le plan sécuritaire, ces 3 dernières années, s'est considérablement améliorée. D'abord, du point de vue de la compréhension et de la définition des défis auxquels nous sommes confrontés. Parce que le Mali a compris que beaucoup de partenaires avec lesquels nous travaillons avaient été eux-mêmes à la source de l'instabilité et de la déstabilisation de nos pays. Donc il fallait sortir de ce paradigme qui nous amenait droit dans le mur et dans la dépendance pour pouvoir faire en sorte que la sécurité des Maliens repose sur les Maliens eux-mêmes. Donc c'était dans la définition et que nous puissions nous-mêmes investir nos ressources pour pouvoir assurer notre sécurité. Aujourd'hui, le Mali dépense plus du quart de son budget national pour assurer la défense et la sécurité. Il y a des partenariats stratégiques qui ont été mis en place pour nous permettre d'acquérir des équipements, des capacités militaires qui nous permettent de faire ce travail-là. Avec tous ces éléments-là ensemble et la mobilisation du peuple malien devant les forces, derrière leurs forces de défense et de sécurité aujourd'hui, les résultats sur le terrain, c'est qu'il y a une amélioration significative de la situation sécuritaire. C'est évident, la sécurité n'est pas un concept à somme zéro, si vous voulez dire. En tout cas, c'est pas sans risque. Elle s'améliore, mais en même temps, les défis peuvent être changeants. Donc ça, il faut être conscient de ça. Mais, en même temps, il ne faut pas que nous soyons aussi piégés par des concepts qui ont été amenés par d'autres. Parce que si nous combattons le terrorisme, il faut savoir, mais qui nous combattons? Qui sont ces groupes terroristes? Qui les financent? Qui leur donne l'argent. Récemment, il y a des pays européens, l'Ukraine pour ne pas le citer, qui est sorti pour déclarer devant la face du monde, par ses propres officiels, qu'ils ont donné des renseignements et des moyens, capacités militaires à des groupes terroristes dans le nord du Mali. Nous savons qu'il y a des pays dans la région qui constituent des bases arrières à ces groupes terroristes. Donc le terrorisme ne peut pas être combattu tant que nous ne dénonçons pas de façon ouverte ces différentes complicités, parce qu'en définitive, j'ai la conviction que le terrorisme est créé pour déstabiliser nos pays, déstructurer nos pays et prendre possession de nos ressources et des positions stratégiques sur notre continent.
Vous êtes connu dans le monde entier, et surtout après vos déclarations aux Nations Unies, comme l'un des meilleurs défenseurs de la souveraineté des pays africains ou bien la souveraineté des États dans le monde entier et le Mali en particulier. Et vous êtes sorti, comme le Niger, comme le Burkina Faso, de la CEDEAO, comme idéologiquement pour mieux exprimer notre souveraineté et indépendance, il faut mieux sortir. C'est vraiment la réponse à ce qui se passe en Afrique de l'Ouest?
La question est plus complexe que ça. Nous ne sommes pas sortis que pour promouvoir notre souveraineté, en réalité. Nous sommes sortis surtout parce que nous estimons que des organisations comme la CEDEAO ont dévié de l'idéal d'intégration de nos continents et soumis à des injonctions de puissances étrangères qui utilisent l'organisation pour sanctionner nos populations et créer des menaces, y compris des menaces d'intervention militaire dans nos pays, et que nous ne pouvons pas continuer à appartenir à des organisations dans lesquelles, parce que des organisations d'intégration sont par définition des organisations où on procède à un transfert d'une partie de sa souveraineté. Donc je ne peux pas donner ma souveraineté à une organisation qui en retour l'utilise pour créer la menace contre mon pays. Donc nos pays ne se sentent plus en sécurité et on ne se sent plus même maître dans les organisations que nous avons créées. Et je crois que c'est pour mettre un terme à cette situation que nous avons, et après beaucoup de plaintes et des dérives et des erreurs qui ont été commises, que nous avons estimé que ces organisations n'étaient pas dans la bonne direction.
You just talked of elaborating a strategy for the 79 member countries which you are heading the General Secretariat, and you in Yaoundé ended up with what was called the Yaoundé Declaration. What are the salient points in that document which can constitute a kind of modus operandi for
yes. Again, it's important to say that the ministers indeed did discuss in depth. They did realize that they do indeed produce those critical raw materials at various levels. When you look at the level of Cameroon, Cameroon is particularly more advanced than others. You have others who have already been in the sector for quite many years, DRC, Zambia, who also presented their experiences. But they all realized that it is indeed important that in order to be able to do the mining of critical raw materials, they need energy, they need infrastructure. But again, once you produce those raw materials, they also realize that part of that should be transformed locally to feed the local market, and some of that then can be exported. So indeed, they're looking at all areas where they do need to satisfy the local needs of the country. For example, the local communities, they've got to benefit from that. And indeed, in those joint points that the ministers discussed on, which are now in the Cameroon Declaration, which are now going to the Council of Ministers at the end of the month of June for approval, will then become a strategy for all OECPS member states. But as they work, as they go on, certainly they will encounter other difficulties. Yesterday, we had the bankers also who came to look into how they can indeed work either with projects, either with countries, how they can indeed finance some of those projects. You know, mining is not a cheap project, and naturally it needs money. But so this then means that member states have also realized that they can not only sometimes go into projects where they can go jointly, but they can also see how they can leverage together to make sure that the outcome of what comes from the mining serves indeed their communities.
So some of the top 10 producing mine countries in the world are basically countries from the Organization of the African, Caribbean, and Pacific countries, the Democratic Republic of Congo, South Africa, Angola, the list can go on. Well, you can talk of Australia, Canada, the United States, Russia, who are at the other end of the world. As a structure, as an organization, what are you doing concretely to accompany your member states in benefiting from the proceeds of their natural resources?
Well, yeah, that's why I think we met, because we are 79 member states, and therefore here there is also a possibility for member states to make a cartel, to elaborate policies together. You know, we are member states who have over many years depended on what the outside world wanted from us, or what they wanted to import from us. And generally our development was not based on our own needs. And therefore, if we work together, first we can know how we can support each other. In terms of infrastructure, in terms of energy. For example, you can produce energy here and support Gabon, you can support maybe the other regional countries in this region.
Absolutely.
You can produce energy in DRC, support Angola, support Zambia, support up to South Africa even. So the countries are now looking at all these elements. But I should also say that they're also looking at the green mining policy of the African Union. So they are looking at all other policies that have already been elaborated. And the whole goal is to make sure that they do the things right, to satisfy their needs, to satisfy their populations, because it is indeed the development of our countries.
How many partner organizations do you work with today, or member states are part of your network?
Your member states apart from my network?
How many countries do you network with today?
Yes.
Or how many organizations do you confederate with today?
Well, your question is a very broad one, because the OSCE mandate is again very, very broad. Our underlying work, if I were to summarize it, is building a third way of development from the South, by the South, yet for humanity, in the words of our constitutive charter, of building knowledge-powered societies, which goes by democratizing access to knowledge, visibilizing research within our countries, reinforcing the capacities of our researchers and their networking capabilities, building what we call shared green prosperity, which goes by consolidating the common leveraging union of borrowers, which was created in November 2023 by our member states, which are 28 currently, but growing, which is the world's first union of sovereign borrowers in order to both collectively negotiate debt relief, should the country so wish, but also access fresh, highly concessional finance. Of working towards, as well, intensifying South-South cooperation. Because, you know, our countries of the South are extremely diverse, but we share some systemic challenges and aspirations. Illiteracy is not the only of the challenges, unfortunately, that we share across the three continents. But to intensify South-South cooperation, you must also strategically invest in the infrastructure to connect our countries.
One of your core mandates is to help the countries of the South and most of your members to work out of this debt ceiling crisis in which they are found. How do you help accompanying them in that domain?
Well, as I was mentioning, in November 2023, our member states created, by adopting the bylaws, the Common Leveraging Union of Borrowers, the club, which is again the world's only and first sovereign club of borrowers, which means the first platform with full-time teams dedicated to supporting the club through the decisions of the Ministerial Committee, which is composed of all the ministers of finance who take decisions by consensus, to one, collectively negotiate debt relief, if they so decide. That is, moving from dynamics of creditor coordination exclusively to dynamics of borrower coordination to achieve common objectives. But look, debt relief alone is futile. Day of debt relief plus one, our countries need new finance. And if that new finance comes with the same conditionalities, the same interest rates, the same maturities and the same grace periods or lack thereof that led us to debt unsustainability in the first place, then our efforts will have been for naught. And so the club acts as well as an innovative mechanism for member states to secure fresh, highly concessional finance in 6 strategic areas. And I mentioned those 6 strategic areas because it's very important for your viewers to hear all of them, because the issue of debt is that we must address the structural drivers of our economic dependencies. And the structural drivers of our economic dependencies is that we are countries that have not achieved yet food sovereignty.
6 points are?
Well, have not yet achieved food sovereignty, have not yet achieved high value added industrialization, have not yet achieved energy sovereignty, which means we're net exporters of raw or intermediary materials, net importers of high value added products. And therefore these 6 strategic areas are balanced and inclusive education systems, as you'll appreciate, no development without education. Integral health systems, where we have to speak of preventative care as much as curative medicine. Sustainable agriculture, and through that food sovereignty. And when I say food sovereignty, not necessarily nationally, it can be regionally as well. Renewable energies, and through that energy sovereignty. Infrastructure development, not only nationally, but also the infrastructure that connects our countries better.
And I presume this should be your first official visit to Cameroon, is to see how Cameroon has worked on her universal health and preparedness review strategy. You were at the meetings. Before heading to the various encounters you had with government officials, including the Prime Minister, what finally did you see of Cameroon's documents?
So what we have seen in Cameroon, even before we went into the meeting, was a very engaged public sector. You know, we've seen very good documents addressing specific parts of what a government needs to work together. So I think a lot of groundwork has been done. It takes a lot of courage for a country to open up itself for a review. It's not an easy thing. This is a voluntary process. No one has pushed Cameroon to do this. So I think it's really something to praiseworthy that Cameroon has said, listen, this is our level of preparedness. We want to open it up both to examine it ourselves with colleagues in different sectors, but also open it to a global process so that our peers, people working in other countries, WHO colleagues, can come in, we can collectively identify opportunities for improvement and then work together in a plan and process to improve on the gaps that we've collectively identified.
Evaluating what you saw and what could be improved, what did you see as the salient points to help keep the public health system always alert?
Yeah, I mean, there are challenges. Every African country has a challenge of finances. We have multiple problems across society, so it's no surprise that, you know, Cameroon, just like many other countries, are faced with the challenge of increasing the expenditure on health services, right? And, you know, the other thing is, how do you coordinate the various aspects of the work being done, especially in public health? So we made a few recommendations to government to really think again on how to prioritize expenditure on health services so we can reduce the out-of-pocket expenditure on health, and so that really take more responsibility as a community, as a public, on how to fund health services. This is actually a recommendation that came from within the country, from colleagues working and recognizing that while it might serve some purpose to have different disease control programs or targeting different health priorities, coming together to build an agency, one institution that will manage some of these things together might be a good idea. And it's a direction many other African countries are going in.
You met with top government officials, including the Prime Minister. What message did you bring to them during this period when it comes to issues like the universal healthcare coverage, when it comes to emergency management? Cameroon should have one of the most effective systems that functioned during COVID-19 with very limited deaths, and I'm not saying that the financial fallouts were not colossal. So what message specifically did you bring?
Charles, I think the first thing to say is that I met a Prime Minister, Chief Joseph Ngute, who was really engaged and really understood the nuances of the health sector. And it's not in every country where you have a head of government that really understands how the different parts of government work together around a national priority. So first thing is to say we met a fairly open door, really an opportunity to engage really strategically around the challenges and priorities, and had a very good conversation with him. So I think we left that meeting understanding, yes, Cameroon has many challenges, like many other countries, but you have an engaged government that is ready to listen, ready to analyze its own circumstances and challenges, and ready to act on them. So out of this UHPR process, we expect a good report that will be shared and presented, and I'm confident that the Prime Minister and his cabinet will act on the findings and take the country forward.
Vous avez succédé, Issa Hayatou, à la Confédération africaine de football. Si ce n'est pas une question de polémique, quelle est la CAF que vous avez trouvée?
Lorsqu'on succède à quelqu'un, ne croyez pas que tout est nul là-dedans. Il y a des acquis. Et si vous avez bien suivi, à aucun moment, j'avais critiqué que ce soit lui, mon prédécesseur, ou celui qui m'a succédé. Je ne suis pas dans cet état d'esprit-là. Pour moi, je suis arrivé à la tête de la Confédération, c'est Dieu qui a fait ainsi, je le prends comme ça. Je suis parti avec un mandat, un seul mandat. Vous avez vu ce qui s'est passé. Je ne ferai pas de commentaires par rapport à ça. C'est mon destin, je l'assume. Et aujourd'hui, je suis dans une autre phase de ma vie qui était avant d'arriver. Parce que j'ai été au gouvernement, j'étais vice-président de Sénat chez moi. J'ai démissionné lorsque j'ai été élu à la CAF. Aucun texte ne m'oblige à faire ça. Mais je l'ai fait par respect à notre continent, par respect à la Confédération africaine de football. Et là, je suis revenu prendre des responsabilités chez moi, autre chose que dans le football. Je me suis présenté à la dernière élection législative dans mon pays et je suis, depuis quelques moments, j'ai été élu député de Madagascar. Voilà.
Depuis le départ de Issa Hayatou comme président de la Confédération africaine de football, il y a une reproche qui est faite à tous ses prédécesseurs, ou bien ses successeurs, autant pour moi, qui n'arrivent pas à stabiliser la période et le moment où la Coupe d'Afrique des Nations, la compétition phare doit être joué. Nous jonglons entre janvier, juin, décembre. En français facile, on accuse les successeurs de Issa Hayatou d'installer l'instabilité. Contexte, la CAN doit être jouée. C'est une accusation légitime?
Là, je commence à... Moi, lorsque j'entends ça, ça me révolte. Et surtout de votre part, parce qu'on suit le raisonnement européen. La différence, notre continent est très diversifié dans tous les domaines. Météo, climat, même morphologie des gens. Parce qu'on ne peut pas dire que l'Africain est toujours un noir. Non, il y a d'Africains blancs. Donc on est un peuple très diversifié dans tous les domaines, même géographiquement, et sur sa population.
Économiquement, culturellement,
Exact.
linguistiquement.
Exact. Et là, si vous dites qu'il faut stabiliser une organisation de la CAN, c'est aller à l'encontre de la nature africaine.